Just as we're waiting for a couple more minutes here, if you're standing, you are free to sit on the steps as long as you make a path for egress. So feel free to grab a spot. I know we're at standing room capacity, which is amazing, but it's an hour-long talk, so if you'd like to sit, you can. Also, there's a seat right here.
No problem.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Midtown Scholar Bookstore. My name is Amanda. I'm the events manager here at the Scholar. First and foremost, we want to thank you for braving the heat, or should I say the soup, to join us this evening. We're delighted you're here, and we hope you enjoy tonight's event featuring Mary Roach and Claire Seller. Before we get started this evening, I do have a few housekeeping notes. First, tickets for the many exciting events we have planned for this summer, including appearances from Chris Whitaker, Ruth Ware, and Jill Lepore, are on sale now. That's at midtownscholar.com. Please feel free to grab an events postcard as you leave and stay tuned to our social media as well as our e-newsletter so that you never miss an upcoming author appearance. Second, this is the first time we've ever hosted a pre-book launch event, so you will notice that you do not have a book in your hands this evening. It is also the first time that Mary is discussing her latest book with the public. Replaceable You is out this September, which means that we cannot let you take it home tonight, but rest assured you will be receiving the signed first edition copy included with your ticket purchase as soon as the book is available. Keep an eye on your email this September as we will contact you when the book is ready for pickup. So thank you so much for your understanding there. And finally, we will be having a book signing with Mary immediately after the talk this evening. That will take place next door in our Rare Books building. So you'll go out those doors and make a left. There will be staff available to guide you. You may bring up to 2 books from home into the signing line, and all other books must be purchased through the bookstore. We do, of course, have copies of all Mary's previous books available up at the cafe. But now, I have the honor of introducing our authors this evening. Our interviewer is Claire Seller, professor of English at Dickinson College, where she teaches courses on 20th century literature, the health humanities, and disability studies. She's currently working on a literary and cultural history of polio. So a real cheery, sure. And our featured author this evening, Mary Roach, has written 7 best-selling works of nonfiction, including Grunt, Stiff, and most recently, Fuzz. Her writing has appeared in National Geographic and the New York Times Magazine, among other publications. She lives in California. Because we are pre-publication, I do have to just give some notes on Replaceable You, Mary's forthcoming book, subtitled Adventures in Human Anatomy. Actor Jason Alexander says, "We are all replaceable to some degree or another, with the exception of Mary Roach. There is no one and nothing like her, singular, bizarre, dedicated, passionate, fascinating." And Deborah Bloom writes, in her brilliant and brilliantly funny book, Replaceable You, Mary Roach explores the puzzle of the human body, the way we can assemble and reassemble the very human pieces into different versions of who we are and how we work. The result is intriguing, compassionate, wise, and, as with all her books, addictively readable. Or, to put this another way, don't miss it. We are thrilled to welcome Mary and Claire to the Scholar this evening, so please join me in giving them a very warm Harrisburg welcome.
Hi, everyone. Probably like a lot of you, I am going to have to really try not to just fangirl out for the next 30 or so minutes, and then we're going to take questions from you all. Mary, thanks so much for joining us in Pennsylvania. We're really glad to have you.
My pleasure. Thank you all for being here and for practicing delayed gratification. It's wonderful. Yeah. This is a new kind of event.
Well, since this is a new kind of pre-publication event for all of us, I think, I thought I would start in maybe an unconventional way. There's a moment early in Replaceable You where Mary writes specifically what this book is not. By way of warning, she writes, or reassurance, this book is not a roundup of the latest advances in regenerative medicine, nor, she writes, am I here to predict the future. Instead, and those of you who've read Mary's other work before won't be surprised to hear this, this is a book that's really concerned with human questions about science, human experiences of medicine, medical practice, and medical innovation and progress. And Mary, I wonder if you want to talk about that focus and how it came to be for you, that this book would ask very essential, kind of eternal human questions about super cutting edge research.
Well, sure. This is a book that when I mention the title, people go, "Oh, so you've written a book about prosthetic limbs?" I'm like, why? No. I mean, I'm sure there is a book to be written about prosthetics, but no, I don't do that. That's not what I do. But that was kind of how I got into this topic, and it's kind of a weird story. I got an email from a reader who felt very strongly that I should write a book about professional football referees.
Of course, obviously.
I'm, having read all my past books. It seemed to her that that was the logical. Anyway, I write back to people who write to me, and so I wrote back and said, well, thanks a lot, and we sort of were talking, and it turns out she's an amputee, and I was asking her questions about that, and I said, well, kind of what's new in the world of prosthetics and amputation. What's new in amputation? One of the things she said, she mentioned a couple things, but one of them was, she said, I'm an elective amputee, which is someone who chose to have a healthy but underperforming, in her case, a foot, removed, and how hard that was to find a surgeon who was willing to do it. She had spina bifida, and basically her foot was kind of twisted, and she couldn't run, she could not walk quickly, and she would see people with prosthetic lower limbs running and biking and participating in all manner of sports, and she's like, what, like your hip wears out, you get an artificial hip, why is this different? But it is, and anyway, she succeeded, she does have. But I said, well, wow, that's kind of interesting. And, she said you could come with me to the Amputee Coalition conference. And I don't know, so that was kind of how things got rolling with this book. So that's just, I do talk about something, it's not about prosthetic limbs. It's not that I completely ignore the prosthetic limb itself, but it's much more, to me, it was just to have conversations with people at the conference, and so humans are where it's at.
Yeah. That prompts me to jump a little bit ahead in my plan, Mary, for our conversation, because the woman, the reader, by the way, if anyone has an idea for Mary's next book, maybe not referees, the reader who wrote to you sort of sits at the middle of a spectrum in this book. So this reader has had elective surgery, and to improve her life and to minimize her persistent experience of pain, like really intense chronic pain that limits her activity and mobility. But the book also goes from one end toward really life-saving interventions and developments in progress, things like tissue donation, all the way over to the entirely cosmetic and elective, things like hair transplants and, what is the polite way to put this, kind of Kardashian butt making?
The Brazilian butt lift, which is essentially taking fat from one part, like where you don't want it, and putting it where you do want it. So yeah.
It's a chapter filled with characters, let's put it that way. But could you share with us, Mary, just how you thought about sort of arranging these modes of progress and medical practice that have very different stakes for human lives?
Sure, yeah. Well, one of the chapters deals with breathing machines, having a machine breathe for you. And intubation is something that I have, I kind of heard about it, that it's kind of you've got 4 minutes to get it done, and it's a tricky thing to do. And I spent time with this anesthesiologist who was actually teaching a class. He had some fellows, medical residents that part of what they had to do was intubate a dummy, and he said, well, you can come along and intubate the dummy too. So I did that. But one of the things he was talking about was, he's like, this is scary stuff. He said, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I'm still nervous when I have to intubate someone, because you've paralyzed them. So they depend on you to breathe now, and you need to get this tube in, and you have essentially 4 or 5 minutes, or they're going to die. So, and he said, it always amazes me, people get surgery, he said, willy-nilly, like getting their hair cut. And he's like, this is, and it is kind of amazing. The chapter that dealt with the shifting around of fat, the surgeon said, I have patients who have gotten a different breast implant every time they change boyfriends. So it's yeah, and he always, and the trend at the time was for enormous rear ends, sort of the Kim Kardashian fad. And they said, and I was like, well, how do you counsel them that maybe in 2 years this trend might have faded? And he said, if I don't do it, they'll go to someone else. So
yeah.
Whew.
That chapter was really alarming. It's sort of like a kind of cliffhanger to read, amazingly. So you all have already heard, just in passing, a number of the topics and, frankly, the parts of the body or processes of the body that this book is about. But to give you a sense of it, as I was reading, I started making a partial list, and then I ran out of space on the page of processes Mary describes in this book that I know someone who has had them. Okay, so and I bet you could raise your hands and you'll say, yes, same. Okay, so I have a friend who, because of a hockey injury, had to have his nose reconstructed. Any noses? Okay. Skin grafts for burn victims. I do have a friend who had a heart transplant. We probably all know someone who's had to be intubated for surgery. Cataract surgery is in the book, right? I'm seeing a lot of nods for that. Prosthetic limbs and joint replacements, sure. I do have a friend who had a hair transplant. I don't think I have any friends who've had the Brazilian butt thing, but I'm not sure they would tell me. I could go on. I mean, truly, I ran out of space. So this begs the question of what did not fit.
Oh, there are a couple things I wanted to put in the book, but it was I had access issues. Every chapter in my books, I try to go somewhere. So I'm reporting on the scene, so there are characters and conversation and things happening. And I wanted to do that there was a couple chapters. One of them this was something I had never heard about. It's a uterus transplant, and it's a temporary transplant. So the donor is a woman who's done with her uterus, not having any more children. The recipient is someone who, for genetic reasons, can't carry a child. And it's temporary in that you carry the child to term, so you're on immunosuppressive drugs for the 9 months, and then the uterus is removed, and so you don't have to spend a lifetime on immunosuppression, which of course leaves you open to infections and cancers and various other things. So it's a temporary transplant, and I thought that was fascinating. It would have required me to, rush out as the person was, going into labor and kind of fly across the country. But I was willing to do that to kind of figure out a way to make that happen. Could have also, sometimes cadaver uteruses are used for the transplant. Just recently deceased person, woman could, or person with uterus, could donate. And but the 3 or so places that are doing it didn't want me there, and I'm not sure. I think maybe there's issues like the ethics of it. It's very expensive. This is $100,000 you're spending when somebody could adopt or have a surrogate. So I suppose that maybe they were sensitive about that. So that didn't make it into the book because I didn't really have a way into it. The other interesting thing that didn't make it in was the artificial placenta, which is also known as a bio bag, which sounds like a horrible insult for women. Like it's just a bio bag, but the bio bag is you've got everything that the fetus needs in a bag, and it's the point of it at this point is to buy time for a very premature baby. So if a baby comes out before the lungs have finished developing, the baby can't breathe, and you have to put a very small infant on a positive pressure ventilator. The lungs are very sensitive. It'll damage the lungs. So this is a way to keep the fetus viable for 2 months, so that it could survive, because it's a very, very young fetus. And in this case, I'm guessing nobody would write back to me. And the people who are working on this, which I was kind of curious, and then I read more about it, and I think that part of it comes down to the debate on viability outside the body and how that would affect the conversation on abortion. So I think that is why they would rather not be in the spotlight. And also there's, Elon Musk is like, so I can just sort of put anything in a bag and it'll, I can grow it myself without these bothersome women, these bio bags. So, anyway. So okay. There's like 3 Elon Musk references in this book.
There are, yep.
That he's not really going to like. So
He can handle it. He'll be fine. Yeah, I will say there are also, speaking of that story, and sort of, sometimes you get a practitioner who's totally happy to talk to you. And then a lawyer steps in, or a public relations agent. They're not villains in this book, but they harsh the vibe. A fair amount.
Yeah, it's it's funny for the. I have a chapter that has to do with xenotransplantation, which is genetically tweaking a pig so that the organs don't create as strong a reaction. I mean, somebody still would need to be on immunosuppression, but they could actually live for months at least with genetically tweaked organ. So there are 2 companies here, eGenesis and United Therapeutics, that are doing this work, creating these organs, and they were both delighted to hear from me. Oh, we love your books, and let's have a conversation. Let's get on Zoom, and you can talk to the CEO. And then there's like, oh, all we need to do is talk to the legal department. I'm like, okay, well, we can just stop right there.
Yeah, not going to happen.
Yeah. And then, like I was having this conversation with my agent. He said, Mary, I kind of don't blame them, do you? I mean, what's in it for them? They're not getting paid. They're not, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know. Yeah. So.
Okay. There's a couple in this book named Mona and Mark Randolph.
Yeah.
Mona died in 2019, I think I've got that
Something
right.
like that.
Okay. So there's a chapter in this book in part about polio, so of course I read that first because I'm thinking about polio a lot. Okay. And here's how this paragraph goes. The iron lung stands where it always has, in a bedroom painted turquoise in the home Mona shared with her husband Mark on a quiet street in Kansas City. It is one of a handful of operational Emerson ventilators, or iron lungs, left in this country. I contacted Mark Randolph to ask if I might spend the night inside letting it breathe for me, and Mark said sure. So how do you write an email to someone to say, can I come hang out in your late wife's iron lung just for because it seems so fun?
I was lucky in that Mark Randolph happens to have read my books.
Yeah, I figure you're too modest to put
otherwise,
that here.
Otherwise, that might have been an awkward ask. So, but Mark, I found him through a chain of, there's a woman, Norma Brown, who's a historian of negative pressure breathing, which is what an iron lung is. It's different than the hospital ventilator that's kind of blowing, kind of like a leaf blower down your windpipe. So negative pressure, I was interested in negative pressure, and I was just interested in the iron lung experience. And and this woman, Norma Brown, said, well, there are still Emerson lungs, and there are people who still use them. Mona. Mm-hmm. Mona would sleep in the iron lung, and during the day she would get by with just sips from a positive pressure, kind of just you take a sip of air almost. Mm-hmm. But she would go into the iron lung to sleep. So Mark just basically wrote back, sure, you can come here. And I had this idea that I would, have a meal in the iron lung. And an iron, I didn't know what it was like. That's why I went. I wanted to know, what is that experience like? And it was not at all, it's not what I expected. Here's the thing I never thought about when you are breathing in and breathing out. You can't talk and do these things willy-nilly. You have to coordinate them. But when you have a machine that is deciding when you breathe in and when you breathe out, and you decide you want to talk to someone in the room, you'll start a sentence and it will cut you off. Like, no, we're breathing now. We are not talking. It's also it's very tight around your neck. It has to be tight. It has to be a seal. You can't be leaking air, and so that has to be pretty tight. So it's this, but it's breathing kind of magnificently, like deep breaths. So you're both breathing in this wonderful, relaxed, complete way, and also feeling like you're being strangled at the same time. So it's unlike anything I ever experienced. I also imagined it being very claustrophobic, but it's not because your head is outside. So it's, but I can tell you that you will have an itch on your face that is more annoying than any other, and you cannot get. You cannot scratch your itch. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. It's so funny. There are all of these mid-20th century polio weepy movies in which the beautiful skinny mini heroine in the iron lung bids her boyfriend goodbye with no problem, speaking just as she wants to.
Oh, interesting.
But then he, of course, still loves her, so, it all ends up okay. And everybody walks in the end.
And everyone walks in, which a lot of people did end up.
Indeed.
I mean, it wasn't a life sentence. And what was interesting to me was when you read those memoirs, some of them, a lot of them describe the moment that they first went into an iron lung. And I expected that to be this moment of like terror and claustrophobia and horror. But it was such a relief because they were struggling to breathe, and suddenly they were breathing easily. It was relaxing. It was, and it was normal breathing because negative pressure breathing is, they create a vacuum, so your rib cage expands and you breathe in the way that you would normally, rather than a ventilator, the more commonly used positive pressure ventilator. So they describe these moments of great relief and joy. Yeah. I mean, talk to them a month later, maybe different story. Yeah. But it was
the panic of suffocation.
Yes, but that was eased, and just the tremendous relief that they felt. Yeah.
We don't want to spoil too much of the book, of course, but I loved the book overall for what that's worth. I was particularly moved by the last chapter on tissue donation, which is an incredibly elaborate surgical and, for lack of a better word, kind of bureaucratic process. And in this case, there's the daughter of someone who's agreed to be a tissue donor who becomes a kind of main character or driver of this chapter. So I wondered, Mary, if you could tell us about coming to tissue donation as one of your focal points.
Yeah, tissue donation is something, my first book, Stiff, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers, that was a book that called out for a chapter on tissue donation, but nobody wanted to talk to me. Yeah, nobody returned my emails or calls. And I get that because it is a very, you're talking about a kind of a surgical procedure to remove bones, ligaments, tendons, skin, and how does that work? And how do you do it in a way that the family will be comfortable with? But this one organization, and again, that was through calling, somebody I knew from Stiff who said, let me put you in touch with someone else, who said no, but maybe try that person. This is my life. My life is like a series of no, and then finally a yes. But the Center for Organ Recovery and Education in Pittsburgh does a really good job of this. And they said, sure, come here. And I followed this man who was dying or had just died. So followed him. It was 24 hours. The permissions process where you have to, the next of kin has to go through a series of questions about, was he in prison recently? Did he sleep with men? Did he use IV drugs? Has he had, and then a long list of medical conditions. And most people don't pass all of that. I think Yale has a higher acceptance rate than tissue donors. So, but this guy made it in and showed up around midnight, and around 4 a.m, we were done. Sort of just, took him apart to a certain extent. And it's, the lower limbs, it's done in a way, the face isn't touched, the front of the body, the skin is taken from the back, and it's done in a very kind of precise way. And afterwards, with the exception of the baseball stitching here, he looked the same, really. And it's an amazing, and the number of people that benefit from that bone and tissue and corneas is kind of amazing. Yeah.
Incredible. What did you major in college?
Psychology.
Because I'm just listening and I'm like, I mean, you all know, you've read Mary's book, so you know she has this beautiful way with illustrative images that are not gratuitous that really help you understand, oh, that's what differentiates a third-degree burn from a second-degree burn, to just give one example from this book. But how did you learn not to be queasy?
I don't know. I think there's probably just something wrong with me.
But you studied psychology, so you must know.
You know what? I studied psychology because my junior year, I wanted to spend my junior year somewhere else, and the psychology department was known for being really lax about transferring credits. So on the basis of that and nothing else, I'm like, I'm a psych major. I had no intention of ever doing anything with it, going to grad school, being a therapist, nada. Just like, I want to go to London for the year. This is how I ran my life. So yeah. No, I don't know why I'm not squeamish, but people sometimes go like, "Were you a really weird kid?" And I would go, "No, I was totally normal." And then I would think about it, and there were a couple things where I think maybe, like one point, Mary Hewitt, this friend, gave me a Barbie doll. I didn't like dolls very much. I liked little toy dinosaurs. But, this is what I did with the Barbie doll. I would pull off the head and I'd go, "You have 10 seconds to put the head back on or she dies." Which is actually kind of accurate.
Where was that in the movie? That did not happen.
It doesn't happen in the movie. I know. So that, and I also, with the dinosaurs that I just mentioned, I would play with them in the cat litter box because it was kind of like, that's the environment. They were in a dry environment. It wasn't swampy, and I knew that. So my mom was like, "What are you doing?" So I don't know, maybe it's possible I was a little weird as a child. I don't know, but I don't. I just am so interested by the things that I'm seeing. I mean, the Body Farm in Tennessee is a place that I went for Stiff, and it's an assault on 3 of your senses. It's visual, and it smells, and also the person there will tell you, if you put your ear right up close, you can hear the maggots feeding. And I'm like, oh, I better do that.
Okay, yeah.
Better do that. But it never bothered me because it was the work that they were doing, the forensics work they were doing was just so interesting, and they were taking me through the stages of decomposition. There's the fresh stage, which I think is misnamed. And then there's bloat, and then I forget number 3. But anyway, I just found it really interesting, and I guess my curiosity outweighed my disgust.
I think, Mary, just listening to you reminds me of one of the qualities of your work generally, but particularly of this one, because it's so fresh in my mind, which is, for all of the writing in this book about all of these incredible medical advances, usually made by, a trudge forward and then to the side, it's never linear, there is just this abiding wonder about the human body and what it can do that kind of sustains the book all the way through.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that, because time and again I'd see there'd be some press release like, "Lab-grown penises are on the horizon." And I'd be like, this press release is, like 5 years, 10 years old. Are the penises, are they still out there?
What's happened?
Are they any closer? Should I run?
Toward or away from? I'm not sure.
I know. But Wake Forest Labs has grown a bladder. I'm like, really? Have they? Well, okay, and then I look into it. It's like there are no available bladders that are. Right. I mean, they've done elements of it, but anyway, it kept over and over. There'd be something exciting, and then it would turn out, it didn't work out, or it didn't. It's taken off the market, and rather than like looking at that as sort of the failure of research and development, which in fact is amazing. What the things that are going on right now, and a lot of the things in the book are truly astounding, but they are competing with millions of years of evolution and natural selection. And if you try competing with that,
Yeah.
the body is this amazing, fine-tuned, incredibly complex thing, and you try even something as simple as eye drops, because I had the point in the book where I was like, all right, is there anything that we can make that is as good or better? And I thought, tears. But then, as it turns out, the tear film is incredibly complex. I was on a Zoom call for, the free thing ends at 45 minutes or whatever. Because I'm cheap, I have the free one. I'm like, I got to call you back. So it was like 2 of those free cycles of this guy just telling me about his efforts to recreate the human tear film, and it's got this thing, the glycocalyx, which is like a scaffold that holds the different layers in position. There's these mucins which trap foreign stuff and take them. That's the sleep snot in the morning. And it was just, and eye drops. If anything, they kind of just wash away the good stuff. They feel better for an hour, but they're nothing like what your body is creating. So even just something as simple as tears,
This is kind of one of the through lines of the book as well. It's just how hard it is to try to replicate what looks like a simple bodily process. Okay, last question from me, and then we'll turn to this eager audience. And sorry, this is kind of a downer, but I was struck all the way through the book. So often Mary will write about, right now there's a trial on this, right now we're on the verge of that, and really honoring scientists and the work they're doing. And at one point we're with a scientist, Dr. Jackie Bliley, I think, and she is just motivated by this incredible passion in the face of what might look to the untrained eye like a lot of failure, but it's failure that's instructive and educative. It's the kind of failure we want our kids to learn, you get stronger from this, you learn more from this. And Mary writes of this scientist's passion for her research. As the beneficiaries of this kind of passion and dedication, we owe our scientists a lot. We owe them gratitude, awe, respect. Mostly what they want from us, of course, is a little more funding. Money is an ongoing hurdle, and I feel like that hurdle has become mile high in the time it's taken for this book to come to print. So, with apologies, I wonder if you could just speak to your ongoing correspondence with scientists, how you're thinking about the book arriving in this moment.
Jackie worked in Carnegie Mellon, has a bioprinting lab where they're at the time I visited, they were looking at trying to print heart muscle, and I'm like, hey, you just put some cells in a printer and just put. It's like, no, actually, depending on what kind of muscle, you have to align the cells. The heart, when it beats, it contracts helically. So it squeezes as it contracts. So to create muscle that does that is really hard. They've managed to do it in a tiny little mouse ventricle, which is amazing, actually. But she was saying it would be $100,000 to print one organ. Not that they're even close to printing an organ, but that's their entire budget for a semester. And this book has an epilogue, and one of the things in the epilogue is I was finishing up the book it was like my last possible week with the galleys, the proofs, was when Doge got rolling. And so I wrote to a number of these labs, and I said, tell me what this is doing to your work. And every one of them said, well, at this point, we don't really know how it's going to end up, but does not look good. So even grants that were already multi-year grants that had been funded for years and this work had been going on, those were not immune. Those were not exempt. So there was this just depression and dread and horror. And so, yeah, that's, it's very depressing.
Well, it's never a bad time for a Mary Roach book, but there's never been a better time for this one. Thank you so much, Mary. I think we're going to take questions from the audience at this point.
Yeah.
And we've got, here we go. So we've got...
Yes. Yep, if you have a question, raise your hand. I will bring you the mic. Also, if you're heading out early, don't forget to grab a pair of free wax lips, courtesy of Mary's publishing house. We have 240 of them, so please take one home with you. It ties in very nicely with this book.
I have to say, there are very few people who look better with those lips. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of Lauren Sanchez in the press, and I thought, okay, I'm going to look like Lauren Sanchez. I do not look. I don't know that.
All right, we're going to start right over here.
I look bad with wax lips. They kind of push back your cheek. Anyway.
Hi, Mary. Thank you so much. It was a great talk, and I'm really excited to read your next book.
Thank you.
I'm a neuroscientist, and I study Alzheimer's disease. And something I really love doing is communicating science and just talking to science to people. And I find it really rewarding to engage with people who are scientifically minded. My biggest struggle is I don't know how to engage people who don't believe scientists, who don't believe science or are uninterested in science. And I'm wondering, what are some tactics you use to kind of engage these people who will really benefit from learning about science, but may not be interested or might be intimidated by it?
Yeah, I hear your pain. I think it's like there's this very large misconception about science that it is boring, and to me, I don't understand that, because your body, your dog, your computer, your garden, it is all science. So to say that it's boring. And don't you want to know how stuff works? But apparently people don't. I don't know. But I guess that, I like to think that my books are a little bit of like the gateway drug to science. So I'm kind of, I hope that I kind of bring people around to realizing, oh, it's actually not boring at all. It's super interesting. How do I handle that? That's why the books are funny and have people in them and story, because people respond to story. So I think when you can put the work that you're doing in the context of people's lives and individual characters and tell stories with it, people are drawn into that. So or just get me to write a book about it. MaryRoach1@gmail. Okay, if anybody has a book idea, I'm not going to do football referees, but anything else, just lay it on me. But and thank you for doing that work.
You touched on this a little bit, and also thank you. It's as amusing to hear you talk as it is to read your books, so that was a treat. When you first started out, did you find it easier to talk to people and to get people to talk to you before lawyers knew to be like, oh, we can't let her talk? Or is it easier then or now?
It is much easier now. The first book that I wrote, nobody knew who I was. They didn't know what I was up to. Is she doing an expose? What is she going to do? How will she betray me? So that was difficult. So now a lot of the people in my last few books are people. They're people that have read something, so they know what I'm trying to do, and they're helpful. Either they invite me into the lab or they put me in touch with somebody, and that is a lifesaver for me, because it's like you said, the legal department or sometimes the public affairs department. I mean, I had somebody who. In my last book, Fuzz, which is about human wild... Oh, wait, no, it was this book, sorry. It was the Extracorporeal Life Support Laboratory, which was doing some work with pigs, and the pigs were treated as well as you could treat an animal, research animal. Anyway, they said no. They just flat out said no without telling me why. But the head of the lab said, look, it's my lab, so come here and we'll sit in my office and talk, and then we're going to walk over to the lab, and that's what's going to happen. And I've got seniority, and I don't give a shit. So that was
tenure, baby.
yeah. So that, I mean, he's like 80 years old. Nobody is going to argue with Bob Bartlett. And I said later to him, do you know why did people say no? And he said the public affairs department thought that you were an animal rights fanatic. And I was like, because I wrote the book Fuzz? But if you read that book, you would say, what? I don't know. So you just, I mean, I understand they're nervous, it's a contentious matter and whatever. But to answer your question, it is much easier now. Yeah, it is much easier now, which didn't necessarily, you could have gone the other way, like, oh my God, Mary Roach is calling, run! Run, Mary Roach is on the horizon. Where are you?
Over here.
Oh, you're right there.
So I've read your books. I've learned so much from all of them, and like ghosts and cadavers and oxygen chambers and astronauts and everything. Was there ever anything, or is there a story where you were like, I just can't frickin' believe this? Like, is there anything that really stands out that you just were like, I don't even know how to talk about this? Do you know what I mean?
That's not in the books?
So, or anything in the books, that just surprised you so much, or you learned so much, or changed so much. Like, is there something that really surprised you? Maybe is the better.
I mean, everything in the books is a surprise because I go in a complete idiot. I don't know anything about my topics. What really surprised me? I mean, like the thing about how, an iron lung being a relief, or what is the thing that I can't frickin' believe it? Let me think a little on that.
Has there ever been anything?
Hang on. I thought. Okay. All right. Hang on. Okay. And this was really early on, and kind of how I cemented my decision to do this book. I was talking to this woman who she works she deals with fat, and there was a point where I thought maybe I'll do a book about fat, and I'm not going to do a book about fat. But she said, in the course of my conversations with people are very rambling, and in the course of this conversation, she said that there was a surgeon in Georgia, former Soviet Georgia, who had built a penis using a man's middle finger. And I'm picturing, of course, just the finger, like working, like you could go, come here. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to meet this guy. I need to see this. Holy shit. And I looked it up, and there's a paper, and of course I couldn't get the surgeon to reply to my emails, and I wrote them in Russian, in Georgian, in English, and finally I said to my friend who loves to travel, I'm like, we're going to go to Tbilisi, because there's a guy there who turns fingers into penises. So there you go. It just took me a while.
In that vein, you said you say no. You get told no all the time. Have
Yeah.
you ever said, absolutely, I draw the line, I cannot do that?
You mean like I can't write about that? Me?
You can't, no, the things that you have to do in order to get to your writing, the body farm, those things. The experiences that you go through in order to have you do your research.
If it's going to be good material, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do the ultrasound sex thing. I'll do whatever it takes. One thing that I didn't do that did make me nervous, I was going to do it. For Grunt, I was going to embed with the Chaplains Corps, and I was going to, who go out on missions, and I got turned down by ISAF, which is the global partner. The U.S. military was like, be my guest. Go ahead. Get yourself blown up. I got turned down. But I did have qualms about that. I mean, that's a pretty dangerous thing I was going to do, but I felt like it would have been a good thing to do for the book. So is there anything I haven't done? I don't think so.
I mean, in this book, you do get a hair follicle transplanted to your leg.
Oh, yes. I wanted to, there's something called donor dominance, which is, if you take a hair from the back here, where people don't lose, men don't lose hair here in the back and the sides, it's only on the top. So that's with a hair transplant, you take it from here and you put it here, and it's not going to fall out. And because it's going to, retain the characteristics of its homeland. So when I was there, I said, will you take some follicles, because I was donating some follicles anyway for some research. Will you take some follicles from here and transplant them here? Because I had this idea that by the time the book tour came around, I could have some luxuriant flowing hair, braidable even. On my
nurse
leg.
is not happy when she finds out where you want this to go.
No, Galena, she's like, she did it, but they did 2 follicular units, each one with 2 follicles, so they could have been, but it didn't take. I'm so disappointed.
Same.
So disappointed. I kept thinking, maybe you're just a slow bloomer. It's not happening. No. Thank you for asking about that. Anyway, no, not much. Not much I wouldn't do.
Hi. Thank you so much for speaking.
Yeah.
I'm also going to kind of ask a question for a bunch of us here. We're anatomy doctoral students.
Oh, yay.
So
Yay.
we really appreciate the passion that you speak about this, and obviously we're passionate about anatomy. So I have a silly question, but what's your favorite organ or your favorite part of the body? Something that really excites you, because we can really understand that.
Yeah. I think that the liver, just visually, is I think it's just like streamlined and glossy, and I don't know, it's just a boss organ.
Totally agree, yes.
I'm all about the liver.
Okay, a lot of liver fans in the house.
Hi.
Hi.
I'd like to brag that I know someone whose husband had a very, very rare lung disease, and unfortunately, it killed him. And also, unfortunately, he passed it on to their 2 children. So she lost her husband, and then had to watch her children suffer, and then they got on the wait list. And their daughter had a lung transplant, a double lung transplant, which was successful, but apparently childbirth can affect your hormones and all that jazz. Anyway, long story short, she just had, and she's in a very small group, she just had her 3rd double lung transplant.
Oh my goodness.
There are less than 2 dozen people who've had that. That was done at Temple in Philadelphia.
Wait, so consecutive. She doesn't have 6 lungs.
Correct.
Right? Okay. All right.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
But she got COVID. She had
Oh, I see. Okay.
all
Yeah.
kinds
Wow.
of things happened to her.
Yeah.
And she just had her 3rd double lung transplant, all done by the same doctor, by the way.
That's amazing.
Which was, terrific.
Yeah.
And her son also just had his first and hopefully only, because you should only need one,
Yeah.
his double lung transplant.
That's fantastic.
Very happy
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say my point is, if you're on the fence about donating organs,
Yes.
there are people who have, unstudied, because they're so rare, diseases.
Yeah.
And, the funding was short to start with, and
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
So if you're on the fence, hop off, because
Yeah.
you just never
Right.
know. And hooray for those
Yes.
who have done that.
And yes, exactly. And thank you for making that point. And that's one of the things, I don't get on my high horse about much, but when Stiff came out, that was one thing that I would really urge people to do. If you sort of unpack why people don't want to do it, they have this sense of like it's very invasive, or it's mutilation. I'm like, it's surgery. It's first, you're dead, and it's surgery. It's fine. Why is it okay to cut someone open and move things around for medical reasons? Like what? It's no different. It's going to save lives. And it's just, you have a chance to be a hero as a dead person. Like you're doing the best thing you've ever done for anybody when you're dead. It's so. Yeah, I wish everybody would donate organs, yeah. Yep. Anybody up on the mezzanine? I can't see very well up there, okay. I love that we've got a little mezzanine going.
Right over here.
Slightly off subject, perhaps. One of the things that disturbs me when I think about these type of replacement parts is the economic disparity between who gets it and who doesn't. As we have this ability to replace more and more parts, I mean,
Yes.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you look at some of the newer prosthetic limbs, they're carrying a $70,000 price tag, some of them, and insurance doesn't cover much of that. So who gets it? You know, people who can afford it. And that's the same with, you know, and some of these surgeries are not, you know, insurance, it takes a lot to get insurance on board to cover things. So that leaves it being an out-of-pocket. So much as even the new, those new liquid biopsies, which are tests to, you know, to see if you may have cancer, those are not covered by insurance for various reasons, and they're $1,000 a pop. So it becomes, you know, something for people who can afford it and nobody else. And that shouldn't be what medicine is.
You addressed this a little bit in the cataract chapter, the cataract surgery chapter too, in terms of global health and sort of which treatments are deemed sort of established and safe and really effective, but not cutting edge, you know? Like which are, yes, cheaper and more efficient, but also transportable, essentially, with expertise.
Yeah, yeah.
I just have a comment. Even with cataract removal, there's a two-tier system.
Yes.
People on Medicaid, okay, don't get the same quality of implant.
Or even Medicare, right.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, because I
Right.
had mine done, you know.
No, they cover the basic, they don't cover
the basic one,
right.
but no correction of vision in those cataracts, okay? So, you know.
Well,
my-
that's single vision. You can choose your correction, but not multi.
But the insurance
Yes,
company denies it for those, you
Right.
know, on Medicaid or Medicare.
right.
Which
You
is-
get one focus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Hi, I wondered if you could tell us about any popular science books that you think should have had a larger readership, something that you enjoyed that maybe we don't know about.
Oh, I love the New Yorker writer Burkhard Bilger, and he writes about, well, yeah, I guess it's not entirely medicine. I loved his book Noodling for Flatheads, which is a collection of his New Yorker pieces. I'm going to sheepishly say that I mostly read fiction. Let me think on that one. I'll get back to you.
We have a question up on the mezzanine, up here. Center.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, thank you for taking the time to come out here.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about these types of medicines and all the things that I'm looking forward to reading in this book, there's kind of this conception of baseline health as being 0 and then a deficit of being, say, -5, and then, you know, trying to get people from 0 to 5. But did you have any encounters with how what you were researching kind of interacted with the idea of ableism and how we want to kind of heal people but also give people their space to live the lives the way they want to?
What's the question exactly?
So how did you see any instances where you had to kind of reconcile the idea of ableism with the topics you were investigating for the book?
Well, I remember when I went to the Amputee Coalition conference, one of the people that I met was Ezra Freck, who has one leg amputated. He has a kind of like just 2 fingers, and he's won the gold medal in the U.S. Paralympics. Anyway, when I met him, I said, I didn't know who he was, and I said, "Can you run?" Just like, but anyway, I asked him, I know. That's like when people going, have you ever, I say I'm a writer, have you ever published anything? It was that kind of just incredibly ignorant. Anyway, we had this really interesting conversation where I asked him about the term disabled, because I mean, he's like a high jumper, and he uses different prosthetics for different sports. And there isn't anything that he can't do. It just may do it a little differently. Like to the idea that Ezra Freck would be disabled, but he said, I don't mind the term, it's. But then I was thinking about, I am legally blind without my glasses or my contacts. So, how is that? I'm disabled. I don't know if I'm answering your question at all, but. Yeah, it was interesting to think about the terminology and how we view people with missing limbs. Just some of the ways that people who have an arm amputation, low, above the elbow or below, are just incredibly good at doing things with their knees, with their mouth, with a wall. A lot of them don't even get any kind of a prosthetic, because some of those bionic things that get all the press are heavy. They have to be charged. The battery runs down. Insurance doesn't cover them. And they're like, you know what? I just reach over with my other hand and pick it up. Anyway, it was an interesting experience.
If you had to guess now off the top of your head, what do you think you'll be writing about in 10 years?
Oh, 10 years. 10 years. Oh, my goodness. I think maybe rather than every chapter in my book is a slightly different topic, and I go somewhere, and it's a lot of travel, and it's a lot of rabbit holes. I'd like to do a book where I go down one rabbit hole rather than 15. Because, I'll be 76 then, so I'm not going to, head off to China to visit the pigs. So, yeah.
Okay, so I am a Grey's Anatomy addict. So I was wondering if you ever approached the idea of, if someone is on, a heart transplant list, and, someone got in, 5 seconds before them, but their condition worsens.
How are the decisions made? Yeah. Or yeah, that's a whole topic I didn't really get into, but there's the list, and then there's also the practicalities of how far away is the person. I mean, people often move to a city where, I have a friend who, what did he have transplanted? A kidney, I think, or maybe a liver. Livers. And he moved to Texas because Baylor does a lot. I don't know that there's just more available, or they have a bigger program. But people kind of go where the organs are, because you only have a set number of hours. And I talk about in the book, the heart in a box systems and how to extend the shelf life of organs, because right now they have a pretty short shelf life. But yeah, so the list isn't strictly followed. It's also looking at how likely is the person to survive, and what shape is the heart in. There's a lot of things that go into it that can seem unfair, and that I don't cover that in the book, but and I'm not sure that was exactly the question. Yeah.
In support of science education, I'd like to make this recommendation to the audience.
Yeah.
Both the Washington Post and the New York Times each week have a science section. The New York Times publishes their science section on Tuesdays. I'm less certain about which day the Washington Post does. But for the small price of a print newspaper or your online account, you can see almost anything going on in the field
This is
of
right.
science just using the New York Times
Yep.
and the Washington Post.
Yep, the New York Times, Science Times has some amazing reporters. Yep, yeah. I'm less familiar with the Post's coverage, but you're absolutely right. It's good, solid, straightforward, really clear reporting, and they're covering everything. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out.
All right, this will be our last question right over here.
Actually, I have a question for the audience. I went to the Penn State College of Medicine and got my degree there. I'm wondering how many people here are from the Penn State College of Medicine right now. I had a feeling.
All right.
Nice. I was hoping that. So yeah, I got my degree in neuroscience and fell in love with Stiff when it first came out, and I've been a fan ever since. And having been at the Penn State College of Medicine, I can tell you there's some weird professors there.
There always are.
Some of them are still there from that long ago. You don't have to give a name, but who's the weirdest researcher or person of authority that you learned something from along the way for any of these books?
Yeah, they're weird. The ones that I love are weird, not eccentric or wear funny clothes, but they're people who are so passionate about something that seems so small, but is in fact really kind of fascinating and weird. Like there was a guy, and he was probably approaching retirement. He'd spent his whole career studying chewing. Okay, and specifically, like he was like so enthusiastic about, when you chew on a nut, you're putting a certain amount of force, and then the nut gives way, and your body knows to stop the force. Otherwise, you'd break your teeth. And then somebody else at this place was studying bolus formation. Like when you chew, what do? You take food apart, but then you put it back together in the swallowable state. The swallowable state. Which I think Rhode Island should have as their license plate motto. But these are the people I love who are so enamored and enthusiastic and they're so excited that I want to hear about what they do. So those are the people that really stand out. Who's the weirdest? I'll get back to you.
All right, well, that was our last question, so can we have a big round of applause for Mary and Claire?
Thank you. Thank you. You guys were